There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a room after cake has been smeared across your face in front of 40 guests. It is not the silence of shock. It is the silence of people deciding whether to laugh. I stood there in my wedding dress, my actual wedding dress, 3 months after the wedding, at the party my mother-in-law insisted on throwing to celebrate the marriage properly. With frosting sliding down my cheek, dripping onto the pearls she had gifted me herself, and I heard her voice cut through that terrible quiet like she had been waiting her whole life to say it. That's what gold diggers deserve, a little humiliation before the real bill comes due. 40 people, 40 faces. My husband's hand, frozen halfway between reaching for me and reaching for his mother. And me, standing in the middle of the Whitmore family's backyard, buttercream cooling against my skin, wondering how exactly I had ended up here. My name is Claire, and 6 months ago I would have told you my mother-in-law and I had a complicated relationship. Tonight, I understood it was never complicated at all. It was simple. She hated me. She had always hated me, and she had just been waiting for an audience big enough to prove it. But here is the thing about being humiliated in front of 40 people. It does something to you. It burns away the part of you that wants to keep being polite. And when I finally opened my mouth to respond, I watched her face change before I even said a word. Because she realized, a half-second too late, that she had made a mistake. But we'll get to that sentence. We'll get to exactly what I said and exactly what happened after. First, you need to understand how we got to that backyard, because none of this happened by accident. Patricia Whitmore did not wake up one Sunday and decide to ruin a party. She had been building toward this moment for 2 years. I just hadn't been paying attention. I met my husband, Daniel, at a hospital fundraiser. I was there because I worked in medical billing, coordinating charity care for families who couldn't afford treatment. He was there because his family's foundation had donated the building we were standing in. I remember thinking he looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, like he'd rather be anywhere else, and when I said something about it, some joke about penguin costumes, he laughed so hard he nearly knocked over a tray of champagne. That was Daniel, warm, a little clumsy, allergic to pretension despite being raised inside it. His family had money. Real money, the kind that comes with a name people recognize in certain circles. And from the very first dinner I had with his parents, his mother made it clear she found my presence at their table to be, in her words, an interesting choice on Daniel's part. I remember driving home that night and telling my sister, Meg, that Patricia Whitmore looked at me the way you look at a stain on a white couch. She's just protective, Meg said. Mothers get like that with only sons. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that underneath the cold appraisals and the pointed questions about my career trajectory and my family's background, there was simply a woman afraid of losing her boy. I gave her the benefit of every doubt I had. For 2 years, I gave her all of it. I remember the Christmas before Daniel proposed, when Patricia handed me a gift wrapped in gold paper, smiling the whole time she watched me open it. Inside was a designer handbag, the real thing, thousands of dollars, and a card that read, "Every woman needs to know her worth. I hope this helps you understand yours." I didn't understand the cruelty folded into that sentence until much later. At the time, I thought it was generous. Daniel thought it was generous too, which tells you something about how good his mother was at hiding the blade inside the gift. The proposal happened in April, on a hiking trail we'd walked 100 times. Nothing fancy, no cameras, no crowd, just Daniel getting down on one knee with hands that were shaking so badly he almost dropped the ring into the dirt. I said yes before he even finished the question. I remember laughing and crying at the same time, and Daniel laughing too, saying, "You didn't even let me ask properly," and me saying, "I didn't need you to, I already knew." We called his parents that night. His father, Robert, congratulated us warmly, the way he did most things, pleasant, brief, already halfway back to whatever he'd been doing before the phone rang. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." I suppose. 2 words that told me everything I needed to know, if I had been willing to hear it. The wedding planning became a battlefield disguised as a series of small decisions. Patricia wanted it at the country club. I wanted something smaller, more personal. Patricia wanted 500 guests. Daniel and I wanted 150. Every conversation became a negotiation where I was somehow always the unreasonable one, the girl asking for too much, even when what I was asking for was less. "She's not trying to hurt you," Daniel would say after every difficult call, every pointed comment. "This is just how she shows she cares. She's been planning my wedding since I was born, Claire. It's not really about you." I wanted so badly to believe that too. We compromised, eventually, the way you do when you love someone and you're trying to build a family instead of a war. The wedding was beautiful. Patricia cried during the ceremony, real tears. I saw them, and for one single afternoon, I let myself believe that maybe we had crossed some invisible threshold. Maybe now that I was actually his wife, and not just his girlfriend, she would finally let me in. She did not let me in. If anything, becoming Daniel's wife seemed to sharpen something in her. The comments became more frequent, more specific. At a family dinner 2 months after the wedding, she asked me, in front of Daniel's aunt and uncle, exactly how much student debt I still carried from college. Information Daniel must have shared with her in some unguarded moment, information she now wielded like a small, precise knife. "It's just a practical question," she said when I hesitated. "Daniel should know exactly what he married into, financially speaking." I looked at Daniel. He looked at his plate. That was the pattern, if I'm honest. Patricia would say something cutting, dressed up as concern or humor or bluntness, and Daniel would go quiet. Not agree with her, he never agreed with her, not out loud, but he wouldn't defend me either. He would just wait for the moment to pass, the way you wait out a rainstorm, hoping it clears on its own instead of getting wet trying to stop it. I started keeping a list. I'm not proud of it, but I did a note on my phone titled Simply Things, where I logged every comment, every slight, every moment I told myself I was probably overreacting. Reading it back now, it doesn't look like overreacting. It looks like a slow, deliberate campaign. But at the time, each individual comment was small enough to swallow. It was only the accumulated weight of them that eventually became impossible to carry. The vow renewal party, that's what Patricia called it, though we had been married less than a year and had never asked for one, was her idea entirely. She informed us it was happening rather than asking. She'd already booked the caterer. She'd already ordered the cake. "It's a gift," she told me over the phone, her voice bright and impossible to argue with. "A celebration of the marriage properly, the way it should have been done from the start. You'll love it, Claire. Just leave everything to me." Daniel thought it was sweet. I thought it was strange. This woman who had fought me on every detail of my own wedding now throwing a party I hadn't asked for, insisting on every detail herself. But I let it go, the way I let so many things go, because fighting Patricia Whitmore felt like fighting weather. Exhausting and ultimately pointless. I did not know, standing in my closet 3 months later pulling out my wedding dress, because Patricia had specifically requested I wear it again, that I was dressing myself for an execution. The party was beautiful, I'll give her that. String lights threaded through the trees in the backyard of the Whitmore estate, a jazz trio playing near the pool, 40 of Daniel's family and closest friends drinking champagne under a sky just beginning to turn orange at the edges. Patricia moved through the crowd like a woman conducting an orchestra, and for the first hour, I almost let myself relax. Almost let myself think, maybe this really is a gift. Then came the cake. It was enormous, 5 tiers, white and gold, the same cake from our wedding recreated almost exactly. Patricia insisted Daniel and I cut it together, the way we had the first time, and I remember feeling a small, foolish warmth as Daniel's hand covered mine on the knife. "To another year," Patricia said, raising her glass, smiling that smile I had learned too late to distrust. And to Claire, finally getting everything she came here for. I felt the room shift before I understood why. Daniel's hand tightened on mine. I looked up at Patricia and saw something in her eyes I had never let myself name before, not dislike, not disapproval. Contempt. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Patricia set down her glass and smiled wider. "I mean," she said, loud enough for every single guest to hear, "that we all know why you married my son. And I think it's time everyone else knew it too. Before I could answer, before Daniel could even move, her hand was in the cake, and then it was on my face. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat. The frosting was cold against my skin, sliding down past my jaw, dripping onto pearls that suddenly felt heavier than they had all night. Somewhere behind me, a woman gasped. Somewhere else, a man laughed, one short, startled laugh, quickly swallowed, the sound of someone realizing too late that laughing was the wrong response. I did not wipe my face. I want you to understand that, because it mattered later, though I didn't know it in the moment. I simply stood there, letting it drip, letting 40 people watch it drip, while Patricia Whitmore looked at me with an expression of pure, satisfied triumph, like a woman who had finally, after 2 years, got to say the thing she'd been holding in her mouth like a stone. "That's what gold diggers deserve," she said again, savoring it. "A little humiliation before the real bill comes due." I looked at Daniel. I need you to understand what that look cost me, how much of myself I put into it, how much hope, how much fear. I was asking him without words to choose. And for 3 full seconds, which felt like 3 years, he said nothing at all. 3 seconds. That's all it took for something in me to go very quiet and very still. I turned back to Patricia. I could feel the cake drying at the edges of my jaw, feel every eye in that backyard fixed on me, waiting to see if I would cry or scream or run. I did none of those things. Instead, I reached up slowly and wiped a single line of frosting from my cheek with one finger, and I looked at it, and then I looked at her. "You're right," I said. "I do know exactly what I came here for." The backyard went so quiet, I could hear the pool filter humming. "I came here," I continued, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, "for a husband who loved me enough to marry me without a prenup his mother didn't draft herself. I came here for a family who might eventually learn to see me as more than a line item in an inheritance. And I came here tonight for cake, which, for the record, Patricia, is delicious. Shame you had to waste it proving a point that says so much more about you than it does about me." Somebody near the back, I found out later it was Daniel's cousin Ellie, let out a short, disbelieving laugh, and this time nobody mistook it for the wrong response. Patricia's face did something complicated. The triumph cracked, just slightly, replaced by something closer to confusion, like she'd rehearsed this scene 100 times in her head, and I had refused to read my lines. "How dare you?" she started. "No," I said, and something in my voice must have carried because she actually stopped. "How dare you? You threw this party. You picked this dress. You told me to wear it, knowing exactly what you were planning to do to it. You have spent 2 years finding small, quiet ways to tell me I don't belong in this family, and tonight you decided quiet wasn't satisfying enough anymore. So let's not pretend this is about gold, Patricia. This has never been about money. This is about the fact that your son chose someone you didn't pick out for him, and you have never once forgiven either of us for it." I heard Daniel say my name then, low, urgent, "Claire," but I wasn't finished and I didn't stop. "I have a job," I said, to the whole yard now, not just to her. "I have had one since I was 19 years old. I have never once asked your family for anything, not a house, not a car, not a single dollar. I signed whatever paperwork your lawyers put in front of me without complaint, because I never needed the reassurance. I knew what I married Daniel for, even if apparently he spent 2 years too afraid of you to say the same thing out loud." That last part wasn't fair, maybe. It landed on Daniel too, and I saw him flinch like I'd struck him. But I was done protecting people who wouldn't protect me back, even for a sentence. Patricia opened her mouth again, but her husband, Robert, quiet, pleasant Robert, who I had genuinely never heard raise his voice in 2 years of holidays, stepped forward and put a hand on her arm. "Patricia," he said, just her name, but something in his tone made her go still. "Enough," he said. "This is enough." I found out later that Robert had never known about half of what his wife had said to me over the years. The comments about my debt, the backhanded gifts, the quiet campaign of erosion she'd been running since the day Daniel brought me home. Patricia had been careful to say the worst things only when he wasn't in the room. Tonight, in front of everyone, she'd finally slipped. I looked at the cake smeared across the front of my wedding dress, at the frosting still cooling on my collarbone, and I felt something that surprised me, not rage, not even hurt anymore, but a strange, clean relief. The mask was off. Whatever happened next, at least now everyone in that backyard knew exactly who Patricia Whitmore was, instead of guessing at the version of her she performed for polite company. I said, quieter now, I'm going to go clean up. I turned and walked into the house, through the kitchen where the caterers stood frozen mid-motion, trays balanced in their hands, and up the stairs to the guest bathroom I'd used 100 times before. I closed the door. I looked at myself in the mirror, frosting drying at my jaw, mascara starting to run, pearls sticky with sugar, and I did not cry. I want to tell you I cried because that would make a better story, the kind where the heroine finally breaks. But I didn't. I just stood there, breathing, feeling something in my chest settle into place like a bone resetting. There was a knock, Daniel's voice careful. "Claire, can I come in?" I let him in. He looked wrecked, pale, his tie loosened, his hands opening and closing at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. "I should have said something," he said. "Out there, I should have said something immediately, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. I keep asking myself why I froze, and I don't have a good answer, and I hate that." "I know," I said, and I did know. I'd watched him freeze in front of his mother for 2 years. It wasn't a surprise. It was just finally undeniable. "I'm not choosing her," he said. "I want you to know that. I'm not Claire, I married you. I would marry you again tomorrow. But I think I've spent so long trying to keep the peace with her that I forgot what it costs to keep asking you to be the one who absorbed it." I looked at him for a long moment. There was a version of this story where I forgave him instantly, where his apology fixed everything, and we walked back downstairs together, united, and Patricia apologized too, and the whole family healed in one beautiful, tearful scene. That is not what happened. What happened was smaller and slower and more honest than that. "I love you," I told him, "but I need you to actually hear me, not just tonight, every time. I can survive your mother not liking me. I have survived it for 2 years. What I can't survive is being the only one in the room defending myself every single time while you decide whether staying quiet is easier." "It's not easier," he said. "It never felt easier. It just felt safer. And I think I've been choosing safer instead of choosing right, and I don't want to keep doing that." We didn't go back downstairs that night. Daniel drove me home while I sat in the passenger seat in a ruined wedding dress, and somewhere on that quiet road, I felt the strange, aching relief of a wound finally being named instead of hidden. The weeks that followed were not simple. Patricia did not apologize, not really, not in any way that meant something. She sent one stiff text, 3 days later, saying she regretted how the evening had gotten out of hand, which is the kind of apology that apologizes for nothing at all. But something had shifted permanently in that backyard, and we all knew it. Robert started calling me directly, just to talk, something he'd never done before. Ellie sent me a message that just said, "That was the bravest thing I've ever watched someone do at a party. Also, I'm sorry about the cake." Small things, but they mattered. Daniel changed too, slowly, the way real change happens, not in a single dramatic scene, but in 100 small moments after it. The next time his mother made a comment about my job, my background, my worth, he didn't go quiet. He said calmly, clearly, "That's not something we're doing anymore, Mom." And he meant it, and he kept meaning it, dinner after dinner, until Patricia finally understood that the version of her son who would let her run the show without consequence was gone. I won't tell you Patricia and I ever became close. We didn't. Some wounds don't heal into friendship. They heal into distance, and that has to be enough sometimes. But I stopped waiting for her approval. I stopped keeping the list on my phone. And somewhere in the space that opened up once I let go of needing her to love me, I found something better. A marriage that finally felt like it belonged to both of us. Instead of one that had to be constantly defended against outside forces, neither of us had the courage to name. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I said that night, standing there in a ruined dress with cake drying on my collarbone, in front of 40 people who would talk about it for years afterward. I don't. Not for a single second. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying silent to keep the peace. It's finally, calmly, telling the truth, even with frosting on your face, even with your voice shaking, even when every person in the room is watching to see if you'll break. I didn't break that night. I finally stood up straight for the first time in 2 years, and I have not stopped standing that way since.